I am 78 years old, and it has taken me this long to notice that people have been stepping away from me quietly. Not all at once, not in a way you can point to, just less calls, shorter visits, eyes that drift toward the door before I finish speaking. I used to think it was their lives getting busy. Now I know it's something else. It's me. I don't say that with bitterness, just late understanding. The kind that arrives when there isn't much left to do with it. I live alone now. Small house. Same one my wife and I moved into when we thought life was just beginning. The walls still carry the sound of voices that aren't here anymore. Sometimes I talk out loud just to hear something answer back, even if it's only an echo. And when I sit long enough in that quiet, I begin to remember things I used to do, ways I used to be, habits that felt normal at the time, reasonable even, but they stayed with me. They hardened, and somewhere along the way they began to push people away. I didn't see it happening. That's the hardest part. In my 40s, I was a man people relied on. I worked long hours, came home tired, expected things to be in order. My wife would tell me about her day and I'd listen. Well, I thought I was listening, but I was mostly waiting for her to finish so I could say what I needed to say. I had a habit of interrupting, not loudly, not rudely, at least not in my own mind, just small corrections, finishing sentences for her, steering the conversation back to myself. I thought I was being efficient. She grew quieter over the years. I didn't ask why. Another thing I did, I complained about the food, the weather, the noise, the neighbors. Nothing dramatic, just constant low-level dissatisfaction, like a background hum. At the time, it felt like honesty. Now I see it was something heavier, something people didn't want to sit inside for too long. Even now I catch myself doing it. The tea is too cold. The chair isn't comfortable. The world isn't how it used to be. And I can see it on people's faces when I say these things. That slight tightening, that quiet withdrawal. I didn't used to notice that. Back then I believed my opinions were important. I believed people needed to hear them. So I gave advice freely, whether it was asked for or not, especially when it wasn't. My son once told me about a problem he was having at work. He wasn't asking for a solution. I know that now. He just wanted someone to hear him. But I cut him off halfway through and told him exactly what he should do. Spoke with certainty, authority. He nodded, said, "Yeah, maybe." He never brought it up again. That was years ago. I used to think I was helping, being useful. A father is supposed to guide, isn't he? But there's a kind of advice that doesn't land as help. It lands as dismissal, as if the other person isn't capable of finding their own way. I didn't understand that then. There's another habit. This one is harder to admit. I made conversations about myself. Not in an obvious way. I didn't walk into rooms announcing my stories. But whatever someone else said, I had a version of it that happened to me, too. If they were tired, I was more tired. If they were struggling, I had struggled longer. If they succeeded, I had done something similar years ago. I thought I was connecting, but what I was really doing was replacing them. People stop talking when they feel replaced. It took me a long time to understand why conversations around me began to feel shorter. And then there's the way I held on to the past. I talked about it too much. The old days. How things used to be better. How people used to have more respect, more discipline. I repeated the same stories, over and over. I could see when someone had heard it before, the polite nod, the forced smile. But I told it anyway,
because those stories were where I still felt important.
I didn't realize that by clinging to them I was slowly becoming someone difficult to sit with. There's a kind of stubbornness that grows with age. It feels like strength, like standing your ground. But sometimes it's just refusal. Refusal to change, to listen, to consider that the world has moved on in ways you don't fully understand. I argued more as I got older. Small things, unimportant things, how something should be done, what something meant, who was right. I needed to be right, even when it cost me the moment, especially then. My wife used to let things go. She would look at me, take a breath, and say nothing. At the time, I thought I had won those arguments. Now I know she was just choosing peace over me. There's another habit I carried without noticing. I stopped asking questions, real questions, not the kind you ask to fill silence, but the kind that makes space for another person to exist. I talked, I explained, I corrected, but I didn't ask, not anymore. People feel that absence, even if they can't name it. And then there's the way I reacted to change, with irritation. New technology, new ways of doing things, new ideas. I dismissed them quickly, said they were unnecessary, complicated, worse than before. I didn't try to understand. And slowly the world became something I complained about rather than something I belonged to. That creates distance, more than you think. I also became less patient, with noise, with children, with delays, with anything that didn't move at my pace. I would sigh, shake my head, show my frustration in small ways. Nothing dramatic, but enough. Enough for people to feel like they were inconveniencing me just by being themselves. So they stopped coming around as often. It doesn't happen overnight. That's the thing about these habits. They don't announce themselves. They settle in quietly, become part of how you move through the world. And because they feel normal to you, you assume they are normal to everyone else. Until one day you notice the space around you has grown wider, quieter. I remember the moment it became clear. My wife had been gone for 2 years by then. The house already felt different, emptier. My son came to visit, brought his daughter, my granddaughter. She was sitting on the couch looking at her phone. I tried to talk to her, asked her what she was doing. She gave me a short answer. I told her she spent too much time on that thing, that kids these days didn't know how to have real conversations. She nodded, didn't look up. I kept going. About how things were different when I was young, about respect, about attention. I spoke for a long time. At some point, my son said quietly, "Dad, you don't really listen, do you?" It wasn't said with anger. That's what stayed with me. Just tired truth. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. They left early that day. I sat in the same chair long after the door closed. And for the first time I began to hear myself the way others might have heard me. The interruptions, the complaints, the advice no one asked for. The way I turned everything back to me. The repetition, the stubbornness, the impatience, the refusal to let things be as they are. 13 habits, maybe more, all small on their own, but together they shape a person. They shaped me. And by the time I understood that, most of the chances to change it in a meaningful way had already passed. My wife is gone. There are things I never asked her, things I never let her finish saying. That cannot be undone. My son calls sometimes, not often. We speak politely, carefully. There are long pauses. I try now to listen more than I speak. But habits don't disappear just because you see them. They loosen slowly. And time Time is not as generous as it once was. If you're still somewhere in the middle of your life, surrounded by people who come to you easily, who sit with you without checking the time, you may not notice these things yet. I didn't. I thought I was being myself. I thought that was enough. Maybe it is for a while. But yourself is not fixed. It shifts with what you repeat, with what you allow, with what you refuse to see. And sometimes the version of yourself you settle into is not one others can stay close to. I'm not telling you to change. I wouldn't know how to tell someone that. I can only say what I see now, sitting where I am. That people don't always leave because of something big. Sometimes they leave because of a pattern of small things that make being around you feel heavy. And they won't tell you, not directly. They'll just come less often, stay for shorter periods, speak a little less each time. Until one day the quiet becomes the loudest thing in your life. I still have time, I suppose. Not much, but some. Enough to notice when I'm about to interrupt and stop. Enough to let someone finish a sentence. Enough to ask a question and wait for the answer without turning it into something about me. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't bring back what's gone. But it changes the air slightly when someone is here. And maybe that's all that's left to do. Change the air a little. So that if someone sits across from me, they don't feel the need to leave too quickly. That would be enough. At 78, you don't look for big transformations. You look for smaller mercies. A longer conversation. A quieter mind. A moment where someone feels comfortable enough to stay. And you try not to fill it with yourself.